Greetings, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Pilot Review Show. I am Captain Blade J52, and I am joined this week by my merry cohort. Directly to my immediate starboard, we have the Pike Wolf, captained by Mr. Timberwolf.
How's it going, guys?
Somebody spilled a little bit of coffee on Artie's mobile emitter, so we've had to deactivate our RP hologram until we can dry out the mobile emitter and make sure none of the components were damaged. So hopefully our hologram should be operational again this next week. But we do have a few very big bits of news to get through for you guys this week. And no, it's been a little bit since we've been able to get a show for you guys. We do apologize for that. We've had some stuff we've had to take care of, as well as weather-related concerns. But let's go ahead and dive into this stuff, shall we, son?
Let's go.
So, first up we have our RP blog, which is the Chases Interstellar. This is the state of the Romulan Navy. This was the blog done by guest blogger Sir Boulevard. He's one of the mods you see sometimes in the chat on the 10 Forward streams, and is a pretty cool dude. Now, I don't want to give too much away of this, but there was some interesting bits in here that I did notice that kind of, at least from the way I'm reading it, hints at perhaps our next batch of ships. But I'm just curious, good sir, from what you have read, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, honestly, if I'm going off of how I read this, there's a few things you can pull from this. Obviously, ships. They like to do blogs like this to hint at the next ship or ship pack that's coming out, which is always the obvious way to go. So, there's that. Which I believe this was a hint at something that we see as another blog we're going to talk about tonight. But honestly, I took it also with the way Sir Boulevard wrote this. We're looking at either a new Romulus ground revamp, or we're going to get another playable section of New Romulus ground, primarily the capital. And that could be either a social map where we're doing projects on a grand social scale to help rebuild the ground map, and as we're doing that we get access to various vendors for weapons, bridge officers, items, whatever the case may be. Or it's going to be the site of the next fleet holding, because they spent a lot of time describing about how after the Iconian War the capital, which we've never seen the capital, we've just seen this little outskirt embassy area. We've never seen the actual the capital of New Romulus, where they founded it, and the new capital where the government is at, and everything else. And they described how it was laid to waste by the Iconian War and the rebuilding. So, yeah, ships are always coming. They're always coming into the game. But I see that happening. We're going to get a ground revamp of either the staging area and a new map. It could be a fleet holding. Something ground related is coming in this on New Romulus. Something. And to me, that'd actually be a really great addition to the game. Having a social map, at least for me, having a social map, because we do have plenty of fleet holdings, but one that we as a community build. And I know it would probably be spread across a couple of instances or whatnot, but overall you're building it up, you're gaining access as a community, not as a fleet, but as a whole game. We're building up for possibly new vendors or stuff like that. If that's what it came to, I'm all for it, because that would be a great thing. It would kind of be the way I would describe it, and you're going to have to be a very old MMO player to understand this reference. It would be like the Gates of Ahn'Qiraj from World of Warcraft Classic.
Oh, good lord.
So you're going back to 2005-ish World of Warcraft, and it was a server-wide project between all characters, Alliance and Horde, on who would open the Gates of Ahn'Qiraj first. And projects included bandages and other fish or things of that nature, where you had to gather it and put it into a global pool so that you could open the gates for what was considered one of the biggest raids of the time. And you had an Encourage 40-man instance. But it was a server-wide event. So to me, having something like that on New Romulus in today's game would actually be phenomenal. Be a server-wide race to get it done. So to me, that would be absolutely phenomenal. A little less fleet holding. It would be our 8th fleet holding, and I'm hoping one of those doesn't come for another 6 months. Give most people a chance to get to Tier 5 on Colony and enjoy that for a bit before they go into the next fleet holding, which I hope is a 3-tiered fleet holding. 5-tier fleet holdings are terrible on the leveling curve. That's just me. But it just remains to be seen. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for a Gates of Encourage like New Romulus Capital. We rebuild, and over time you see it go from burning piles of rubble and old buildings, and as you're rebuilding it, you see the landscape change to the point where it's a capital again. And then it becomes a hub, the way they're describing it, for anybody that comes through. That's kind of what I saw in it. What about you, Blade?
Whew, Encourage. Man, isn't that a blast from
Just
the
saying.
past? Yeah, well, it kind of fits, I guess. But, for me, from the bits I got from this, I do think we're going to be seeing some new stuff, kind of like you were saying. I'm hoping that we will get to see a bit more of New Romulus beyond just the bits with the embassy that we've seen, beyond just the little bits of ground that we have now. It could be the capital, like you're saying. Could be something else. I know, for me, one of the big things that it hinted at was the possibility, or at least, I don't know necessarily strictly just me that been seeing this. More so, I guess I should say it's a theory I've seen floating around that I kind of agree with, that this kind of hints that we might see new Tier 6 Dyson ships on the horizon. Because by my count, and I could be wrong on this, I'm sure somebody will correct us in the comments later, but by my count, the Dyson ships are the last big mega pack that have yet to see some type of Tier 6 variation. And I know some people didn't really care for the Dyson ships. Personally, I liked them. I thought they were fairly good for what they were intended to do. In fact, I still have the the original Dyson ship from way back that I picked up as an anniversary event. And it was actually the first ship in game that netted us a secondary deflector. So that was really cool in my book. But it'll be interesting to see what they come out with. Like I say, I don't want to spoil too much of this. I know Timberwolf doesn't either. There are some little bits that we picked out of it. But highly encourage you guys to go and check this blog out for yourselves. Read over it, see what you think. Do you agree with our theories? Do you not agree with our theories? Do you think we're really off base? Or do you think maybe there's something else hinted at that we may have missed even? But definitely go check that out. We'll have that link in the description for you guys. But moving on to our next big thing, we have the XMPP Sunset, which is the chat thing. I have the forum post pulled up here because this is how it was announced to us. This is from our own Ambassador Kale on August the 19th. And he says, "Greetings, Captain. As of September 19th, 2019, Star Trek Online will no longer be supporting connection to our internal chat system via an XMPP client. While this feature was interesting and often convenient, it also unfortunately makes it easier for gold spammers and others to reach our chat system. Allowing access via an XMPP client also creates several technical challenges that make it difficult to keep our in-game chat safe and smooth. At this time, we don't have any plans to replace this with a different service. Please feel free to discuss this change in the thread and let us know of any further questions, and we will be updating this thread with any additional notices or clarifications as needed." Oh, excuse me. But, so basically in a nutshell, what's going on here is one of the chat clients that they use to allow people to access the in-game chat is essentially going the way of the dodo due to some, from what this looks like, some security concerns, as well as making it easier for gold spammers to access. Essentially, in a nutshell, people that were accessing the chat from this feature didn't have to log into the game to do it. So I could be sitting, theoretically, in-game, doing stuff in Fleet. Timberwolf could be talking with me at the same time via in-game chat through this feature without actually having to log in. So it does kind of suck for the people that used it, but at the same time, I could kind of see if it is security concerns like this hints at as to why they're doing it. But any thoughts from you on this one, good sir?
I see it, I guess, as a positive and a negative. I get the positive as far as getting rid of gold selling and all that kind of stuff. It helps with added security, which in today's 2019 era, you need all the security online you can get for your company, for your game, or your programs, whatever the case may be. I can get that. But at the same time, this was a perk that typically was linked with lifetime subscriptions. At least way back when. It was one of those things kind of linked to it. And there was kind of a nicety about the fact that I might not be able to log into the game. Let's say I'm at work. I could log in via my phone, through one of the things on my phone, and talk to my fleet mates in game, and set up something. That's, if they're online, I can talk with them. And World of Warcraft, I keep going back to them, can't help it. World of Warcraft has the same thing on their app that they have right now for their game. When you log into the app, you do have access to, at the very least, guild chat. So you can talk to your guildies when you're not actually in the game. But for me, it's kind of a plus and a minus. I can see why they did that, but at the same time, I don't think a lot of people used it or had access to it to begin with. And it was really just so that you could keep track with, hey, are y'all going to be on in a few hours? Let's run this and do this test tonight. I think one of the biggest headaches for players that were using it, since this was kind of linked with that lifetime subscription thing, the negative of it is it's something else that's being taken away from lifetime subs. When right now, when you look at it, a lifetime sub doesn't really offer a whole lot when it comes to today's game. So you're taking away value from something that 10 years ago, because that's how long we've been around now in this game, 9-10 years ago, it was a great value, all things considered. Well, a better value anyway. But in today's game, with the current offerings in Lifetime, it's nowhere near what it used to be worth. And then this is being taken away as one of those options, which really isn't actively advertised as a part of the Lifetime sub anymore. It's just, it's going to piss off veteran players that are used to having this, talking to their friends. Especially considering this wasn't just something that was fleet chat. You could log into any of the chat options you had. So if you were in our chat, one of our chat windows is Ugly Bumps, or your fleet chat, or let's say I'm talking to Luke Critter on his chat. I had access to all of that through this. So I see it as, it balances out, but there's positives and negatives to this.
Okay, I can see that, I guess. But yeah, like I say, there's a little bit of time left while they're sunsetting the feature. I guess to kind of allow people to plan ahead. If you're somebody that does use this service a lot, you can, I guess, put alternatives into use, that sort of thing. We have TeamSpeak, we have Discord, as just a couple of things that we personally have. We've got various Facebook chats we're part of. So there's different ways that we could use ourselves. But like I say, I hate to see this being one of the things where it seems like a few bad apples is potentially ruining it for everybody else. Which, like I say, I get it. I get why they're doing it, especially if it is security related, as this is hinting at. And if it is to stop the gold spammers, I totally understand it. It does suck that it has to happen, but maybe in the future they'll give us something else. And, down the road, like you said, they don't have any plans to do it at this time. Maybe sometime down the road they'll come up with an alternative or something else, but I guess we'll kind of see. But, moving right along, we have our patch notes for the 22nd. Now, there's not really a lot to these notes, but there are a few little notes here, such as resolving the issue with the Section 31 phaser pistols being impacted by a cooldown on the secondary exploit powers. Cold-hearted starship trait, an issue that caused it to not work correctly with beam overload, has been fixed. An issue that caused the Crayo reputation, Polaron dual bank to deal incorrect damage during beam overload has been resolved. Resolved issue that caused the Romulan reputation disruptor beam array to deal plasma damage during beam overload. Okay, I missed that one. Resolved an issue that could cause shots during beam overload to be faster than intended. Resolved an issue that caused the description of the special requisition pack for the promo ships to be partially cut off. Now, one of these I know did get a little bit of flack from the community, and that is the one where the beam overload was firing faster than intended. And I know Timber's going to have some thoughts on that. Now, I will say for me, that's the one that does stand out the most. The other one that did kind of catch me by surprise, because I wasn't really paying attention to it whenever I did fire some of my Romulan weaponry, is that the disruptor was dealing the plasma damage. That's an interesting one to me, because you don't really see stuff like that happening a lot. But I know I've also got some thoughts on the beam overload thing, but Timber, good sir, what out of this, aside from that, stands out from you, and what are your thoughts on the overload change?
Well, I'll go with the overload first, because that's just the biggest one to me, honestly. After 9.5 years, overload is finally a viable, budget, mid-grade build, and high-end power. First time in 9.5 years, because they've been messing with it off and on, and you compare it to just its other basic enhancement, Fire at Will, and it didn't even come close. And it actually underperformed compared to things like Exceed Rated Limits or Surgical Strikes. Now, it is a viable power at the high end. So for them to do something like this 2 weeks after it's been enhanced to this level, I can see why players were pissed off. Now, it really has not affected top-end play, to be perfectly honest. I've been able to recoup pretty much with just a couple of personal endeavor traits, a little bit of tweaking here and there. I've been able to recoup the kind of damage I was doing before this, and it's been basically like a 0.3 second slowdown. It looked like it was being affected by about 10 to 15% firing cycle haste, just by accident. So I can understand why they were doing that, but I'm always leery about when they boost something like this, and then a few weeks later, when everybody sees it's doing phenomenal, they start messing with it to lower its effectiveness. Especially for a power that has not been this good since it came out when the game debuted. So, I honestly hope this is the only thing they do with Beam Overload, and then anything else is just to either enhance it through traits, maybe space personal traits, starship traits, whatever. And then they maybe look at Fire at Will, because there's no reason why Fire at Will should have a damage reduction on it as a spread ability when Cannon Scatter Volley gets a damage boost. I mean, beams don't do as much as cannons. We get that. But I just hope they don't mess with Beam Overload anymore. It's fine where it's at. It's doing great at the high end. I'm actually loving using Overload on my high end builds now more than Fire at Will, because it's less threat that I'm gathering, because I'm not doing an AoE hit over multiple targets. I'm one at a time. So for me, it's been great. Leave it alone, Cryptic. And added with that, before they did this, Cold-Hearted did not proc properly with Beam Overload. You could go through, activate Cold-Hearted through your auxiliary to battery, and for 1 or 2 firing cycles, Cold-Hearted would not stack on targets. Or it would. It would be very inconsistent. So for it to work, it almost balances itself out. They fire a little bit slower, but now we're getting those guaranteed Cold-Hearted procs for the debuff and flight speed debuff. It's actually averaging out to where we're still getting the same amount of damage. So it's fine. My bug report on a fix, though, Blade, is Lucario Reputation does not have a dual beam bank. They only have dual cannons or a beam array. So if they're talking about what you buy out of the Dilithium store, then that's one thing. If they're talking about Reputation project weaponry, they invented something that isn't there. Just putting that clarification out there, because those kind of things bug me. Honestly, the one thing I've seen, this is my last thing, the Section 31 phaser pistols. I haven't gotten a chance to look at them since this patch, but one thing that we were seeing is that, and it might be maybe the secondary exploit power or whatever from the secondary effect, you fire the primary fire on this pistol, and it takes 3 seconds or 4 seconds to cool down. Instead of having a normal primary fire for a bolt pistol where you can just fire like a bolt every second, you fire a bolt and you've got to wait 4 or 5 seconds and then you can fire your second bolt. So it was almost like the primary fire had the secondary fire's cooldown. As in, not just the exploit power cooldown, but the actual secondary fire types cooldown. So, and it's a decent phaser pistol, but if you're firing 1 bolt every 5 seconds, you're not doing hardly anything but pissing off the target. So hopefully that fix is taking care of that. But yeah, the biggest things were just dealing with beam overload and the fact that they need to leave it alone. It's great. I'm loving beam overload. The ship that I'm in right now uses overload 3. And I think I found a great combination to go even higher than what I've been doing before. So leave it alone. And then find ways to boost. Honestly, if they would just give a few little extra things to beam overload. Maybe boost its damage a little bit here or there. The tooltip is inaccurate because it does not describe the power cost increase per shot. Because weapon power cost does increase under beam overload. And I think it's like 20%. So they do need to add that to the tooltip, because people don't know that initially going in, and I have been able to actually verify that. But just a few little minor things to help overload, since Fire at Will's been meta for, better part of a decade. My next thing is going to be, we need boosts for exceed rated limits. I like that power, and it's great, but it needs either damage boosts or time duration increases as starship traits. Because it's a really good Miracle Worker power. Oh, and Plasma. Plasma space weapons. I've been pushing for that for months. We need Plasma space weapon boosts. My rant is done for now.
I'm definitely with you on the Plasma portion, good sir. I think quite a few of the players in game are with you when it comes to Plasma needing a boost. I know for me, when it comes to the beam overload, it does suck that it was lowered as far as the haste. But if it is a legitimate bug, and I've got no reason to doubt that it's not, but if it is a legitimate bug, it does need to be fixed, even though it does suck that it's getting that reduction. But I will say I am glad to see beam overload having gotten some of the changes that it did, gotten some of the boosting that it did, because it really is a fun power to think that you're basically dumping so much energy into the beam that you're basically overloading the weapon, and you just get to backhand an enemy across the map, or however it is, something like that, with these kinds of powers. And I do hope we see plasma boosting down the road, because it most definitely needs it. Now, getting into one of our big articles of the
Ooh.
evening. This is one of the big ones. Yes, sir?
No, I'm talking about what we're talking about next. Ooh.
Oh.
No, wait, we are missing one thing on our notes. I want to bring it up real quick before you get to this last big thing.
What are we missing, sir?
And it was brought up by one of our people here in chat, Snake and Snake. Snake and Shake, I should say. Sorry.
We suck with names, so don't take it personally.
Sorry. Before we get into that last one, there's one that we're missing, and it has to do with the restriction removal of Romulan ships for any faction.
I actually added that, good sir. You just did not
Okay.
fresh.
Well, I wanted to get into that first.
Yep.
I'll just... Yeah. So pretty much, because they were asking our thoughts on this one. I'm torn. And it's because, while it's very nice, I have no problem with this at this point in the game, with what we've seen with Jem'Hadar ships. Now, you can, once you unlock the Vanguards, tier 6, then any tune can fly them. Romulan, Klingon, Federation, whatever. I don't see a problem with this, to be perfectly honest, because this way Federation tunes are flying Romulan Warbirds, and Romulan-aligned Feds are flying Galaxy classes. So they're just kind of swapping out ships. And to be perfectly honest, if more and more Federation tunes are flying Romulan Warbirds, they can more players can see how a lot of the Singularity powers and Singularity cores are gimped compared to standard warp cores. Maybe they'll get a boost. Just saying. But I know the biggest complaint has honestly been, you're giving away Romulan ships to all the factions. I think I saw a Luke Critter post about this. And it's making them feel like they're not a real faction anymore. Romulan ships are just being given to everybody, with a few exceptions. There was like 6 exceptions, I believe, on the blog. 8. Okay, I was close. So, they don't feel like a real faction. And the Luke Critter response to this, well, when has the Romulans actually felt like an actual faction? And I had to think about that. That was one of our off-camera talk/rants. I mean, if we're being honest, Romulans haven't felt like their own independent, powerful faction since, what, Delta Rising? Iconian War? And then it's been a lot of, with few exceptions, there's been a lot of Federation updates and KDF updates and everything else, and they really haven't gotten hardly any love over the past, 2 years? 2.5 years, Blade?
I'd say about in that range, yeah.
So they really haven't felt like they're their own individual powerful faction. Especially when you add into the fact that once you get to a certain level, you have to pick a faction to ally themselves to. You have to pick Federation or Klingon. So, and a lot of times now, thanks to the new changes, now that a Federation-aligned Romulan can fly a Galaxy class, you're going to have a lot less power level issues and all those kind of things on a Fed ship than you would a Romulan ship. More Federation Romulans are flying Fed ships, kind of deal. The KDF side. I can see the lore issues. I can see, the whole faction issue and all that. I just also honestly see it as there's more options for people to fly, and things that a Federation captain or a Klingon captain might never get to use, like the shield absorptive frequency modulator, the Valdor console. Now anybody can test that out on a Valdor, be a part of their build. It does open up some options that were never really there for other factions. That's just my 2 cents on that one.
I kind of, to some extent, have to agree with you a little bit. As far as from the technical side of everything, I am glad to see this because it does give people more options to fly. Lore-wise, I'm kind of like you. I'm kind of on the fence with it a little bit. It makes sense to some aspects, and at the same time, it doesn't. Because we see that we've been seeing in game where they've been getting deeper into the alliance, that sort of thing. As we move closer to the 26th century, some of the future events we saw from the Temporal Cold War, where it's mentioned eventually the Klingons join the Federation, all this sort of stuff, and we see a lot of the races come together and this sort of thing. It makes sense as far as that goes, because you can kind of play it off as well. They're continuing the exchange of technology. So it does, to some extent, make sense that you might see a couple of Federation ships being flown primarily by the Republic. You may see a few Republic ships being flown by the Federation and some of the Klingons. So you can argue it from that point. At the same time, it could also be argued, too, that the various factions wouldn't be so quick to give away their big secrets like that. Because you have to think, it's only been... Oh, excuse me. Whew, allergies are a pain this time of year especially. Weather changes and all that kind of jazz. But anyway, what I was going to say is... you could also argue that at the same time, too, that the factions wouldn't be so quick to give away some of their trade secrets, so to speak. Because it's just been, by the timeline of STO, it's not been that long ago that the Romulan Star Empire was a thing. I mean, it has been a couple of decades, sure, but for me personally, I don't know that lore-wise enough time would have passed that they would just be openly sharing this much technology. Now, of course, the counter-argument to that could be that, it's a different group of Romulans, a different government, a different mindset of people, that sort of thing. So you could kind of argue it from that side. So there's arguments that could be made on both sides of the coin, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There's arguments that could be made lore-wise that says, yeah, they might possibly do this. There's lore arguments that could be made to say, no, I don't think they would do this. But as far as builds goes, like I say, it does open up quite a few options. Like you said, with the Valdor console. It opens up opportunities for Federation players and KDF players to have access to ships they probably never would have flown otherwise. And a prime example is, I believe, the Kara Dreadnought, whichever one has the big plasma lance. So if you're looking for a plasma build, that's a ship somebody might choose because of that reason. You get a very nice plasma weapon, and you get support for some items that otherwise you never would have had access to. So there's some good from it as far as that goes. There's also some potential bad as far as that goes. Because some people, I guarantee you, dude, that some people are going to say, well, this means they're not going to support the Romulans as a faction as much, and this sort of jazz. And I can kind of see where some of those fears may come in. I don't think it's going to be as bad as people are saying. But they have been talking about potentially redoing the Romulans for a while. This could be the opportunity to do that. They say, well, there's a new exchange of technologies. This is our chance behind the scenes to rework some stuff like they've been talking about. But, like I say, we'll kind of see as far as to where it goes. I hope that they use this as an excuse to do more Romulan stuff and play it off that way. Because I honestly am of the opinion that we've had a lot of Discovery stuff. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just, I want to see more 2410. I want to see more getting back to that
Amen.
stuff. And I'm glad to see we're kind of getting there as far as this stuff goes. But the next big...
Which, side note on that one, and this ties into Sir Boulevard, which, not knocking him at all, but his blog did expose something that bothers me. And it's that we are still in 2410, The game in Season 1, when you're starting off as a new toon, is 2409. So everything that we've dealt with has been over the course of 1 year and some change. So going through all of the early Borg, Romulan, Cardassian arcs, the Iconian War, the Temporal Cold War, Zenkethi and Herc, like all of that has happened in the span of a year. Lore-wise, that bothers the heck out of me. Because if that was the case, the Federation, Klingon, and Romulan fleets combined would be down to just the player base at this point, because all the NPCs are dead. I just wish they would space it out more. And I cite from the blog that they're saying that the Romulan capital won't be done until probably, or parts of Romulus won't be rebuilt until mid-2411, which tells us that we're still in 2410. So there's a time where we just need to get away from time travel and just work out our own timeline, because we've only been here for a year. And we've gone through enough that would give anybody PTSD times 12.
Yeah. I do say I have to agree on that. I do wish they'd space it out a little bit more. And then once we get back into the 2410 storyline, maybe do a slight time skip and say we're now in 2415 or 2414. Yep. But just give it a couple of years. It doesn't have to be much. Give it a couple of years, say, well, things have progressed. The Romulans and Federation and Klingons have been sharing technology. This is where this comes into play. And I do think Sir Boulevard did a great job on his blog. I really do. He did a phenomenal job on that. And it was of the quality, in my opinion, of something we would see out of the writers at Cryptic. That kind of professionalism with it and that sort of thing. That's my only gripe, like you with it. I do wish that they would do like a brief little time skip. Doesn't have to be a lot. Just a couple of years. Just say we're now in 2414, 2415, something like that. Just enough so that it seems like, and I hate to say it this way, but it seems more believable, if that makes sense. Because even the Dominion War lasted a couple of years. 3 years. So even if it's just a 3-year jump, okay, that's fine. A lot can happen in those 3 years. But just enough of something so that it doesn't seem like everything's so jam-packed into one area. But anyways, that's our minor, if I could words, little
let's get to the good
rant
one.
On this particular thing.
Good one.
So, getting into the good thing that I know Timbers had some thoughts about. He and I have bantered on this for a while, and we have the Test Your Starship builds on Tribble. Now, this is something that I know he and I have been asking for quite some time now, a couple of years in fact. And Starbase 234 rebuilt and reborn. And essentially, this is the starbase that got nuked at the start of the Iconian War. And in a nutshell, they're bringing it back as sort of a proving grounds type of area, if you're familiar with the World of Warcraft. And now, over on WoW, you can go into the proving grounds and you can test yourself for each of the 3 types of roles. You can test yourself a bit on tanking, on healing, on damage dealing, and it will pit stuff against you in different forms of challenges that you might encounter in an actual raid or an actual dungeon. If you're a tank, oh, well, this guy's got this attack that can cleave the group. I need to face him away from the group. Or as a healer, be like, oh, well, this guy has gotten this debuff on him. Let me purge that. Or as a damage dealer, it's like, okay, this guy has dropped this attack on the ground. Let me get out of that. And then now let me beat his face in. Stuff like that. And it's also got a built-in bit of parsing that is going to come along with it. Now, apparently, from what we've read here, we can kind of customize which enemies we're going to fight to some extent. Do we want to fight Borg? Do we want to fight some Herc? Do we want to fight some Zinkethi? This sort of stuff. And we can change it in various bits of difficulty. We can get feedback in real time with integrated combat parsing function, which is something that I know a lot of people have wanted to see for a while as well. Maybe just because they may not like the idea of using a third-party parser. Or maybe they figure that the ones, or one crypt it could make could be more precise, give more information than the third-party versions might be able to give. But whatever it is, this is a great tool that it looks like they're going to be coming out with. But I'll let Timber go first. I'll save some of my thoughts until afterwards. But Timber, good sir, what do you think about all this?
Warning. Rant incoming. Warning.
Okay. And Snake and Shake, I told you. This is probably going to be a big one. So,
yeah, he tends to rant. Not saying I don't, but he does.
I do. But, like you said, I like this game. I have a reason to.
Mm-hmm.
I love this. I absolutely love it. You can raise your hands in chat for me. Who is tired of having just ISA and HSE as your only parsing primary maps? Because I know I'm to that point. ISA is great for burst, if you're trying to do burst DPS, that's one of the tests we're going to do after this podcast. Something that I'm testing, he's going to break out the Juggernaut, we're going to do a burst test. HSE, at the same time, at the high end, has become that same thing. You're able to burst through that run with massive alpha strikes in 2 minutes. And that's HSE, that's an elite Borg queue. But you're fighting Borg, and Borg really don't feel like they're that much of a tough thing anymore. Why, I've been parsing in Japori Elite. We've been able to get consistent numbers out of Japori Elite. It's a patrol. We can do that every 30 minutes. It's been a nice challenge that we're not fighting the Borg. We're fighting something different. Same with Beta Thorador for Blades tanking. Fighting the Klingons, and sometimes that Beta Thorador can be pretty challenging on Elite. And then Argala. Some people like to use Argala as their testing map. It's also a great map for leveling up your starships. But after a while, it's just really all on those maps, your range of enemy is very limited. You know, Japori is always Klingon. When you're dealing with Argala, you're only dealing with 3 enemies potentials. You're either dealing with Kazon, you're dealing with Hirogen, or you're dealing with Malon. And ISA and HSE have been Borg since their inception. So, a lot of times, I don't want to necessarily just know what I can spike up to. It's great if I'm getting high numbers and I'm setting records, and I love that. I do like to challenge it and see if I can get higher numbers. But to me, another way that I can have it, it depends on how this map is built, is sustained DPS. It's how a lot of other games do their DPS and tanking and healing, is how long can you sustain those numbers, and what numbers you're sustaining over a long period of time. I think we've referenced World of Warcraft now 3 or 4 times in this podcast, so they're probably getting royalties off of us at some point. But you go into a raid over there, in 20, 30, 40-man raid. When you're doing a damage parser, it could be over the course of 25 or 30 minutes of combat. Depending on the difficulty and everything else, you could be in that for a lot longer than half an hour. So it's not about what you can do as bursts and how fast you can do the run, it's how long can you sustain that damage output. And what does that look like? Because you can burst up to insane numbers, but what is it going to be if that burst doesn't do it? What can you hold on to long term? So it all depends on how this proving ground is, and I'm hoping it's a little bit more towards that. But the other fact is, we can set it to normal difficulty. So when you're starting off the game, if this ever makes it to holodeck, you're starting off the game as a fresh level 50 with a budget build. You can go in and test yourself against different enemies and refine. Then you can go to advanced, and you're doing more of your mid-grade builds and your high-end builds, and you've got elite difficulty. But the biggest thing is the way they're describing it. You have access to every single NPC enemy that you faced. So you've got Iconian, which can be a major headache. You've got Voth, you've got Tholian, you've got Zinkethi, Perk. What's one of the other ones that's kind of a headache? Hirogen, which I know we get in Argala, but you can't guarantee it. But you can set it every time. So if your toughest enemy you face is, let's say, the Iconians, because they can shut you down as far as their ionic turbulence and those EM torpedoes they fire that knock out your systems, that's what you face. And that's what you're doing your parse against as far as your damage output and your survival. To me, that is phenomenal. Because that way I can just test against more than Borg. I can see how my build's going to hold against every enemy and come up with a well-rounded one that can nuke everything, and then when I do an ISA parse, obliterates them. So I'm ready for anything. Then you add in the integrated parsing system. A lot of people don't like the third-party parsers. There's CLR and there's SCM. I'm partial to SCM because I've been using it since it came out. I'm used to that program. I like it. If this parser, if they're trying to build this integrated parser to give you the same level of information or more than what the third parties do, then this is a great thing for the average person. They don't have to download something else and then worry about activating it manually and deactivating it manually and all that, whether it be a keybind or typing in. It's just integrated into it, which I can see for some things like, you added an integrated parser to the ISA runs. It's already built in. Well, I'm curious what I want to know. Let me bring up what's already built into Star Trek Online. I see that as a great thing, especially if it's going over more than just damage. If they expand this thing where it's showing out your healing, your average damage resistance rating over the course of the run, your average damage you were taking, your average debuffs, like all those kind of things. They're just going into everything into great detail. Well, it's one less thing you gotta have on your computer, because it's built in. I see this as a huge thing. I'll still run ISA. Sometimes I run HSEs. I really don't run those that often, to be perfectly honest. I like Japori Elite better. But I'll still run ISA for burst DPS tests, just to see how fast I can nuke something when I get the right combinations of stuff. But for this, I love this idea, because depending on how they build it, if they build it like a kind of a Starbase 24-esque like test, old Starbase 24 would spawn in like 30 groups of Klingon warships. So you have that level of scale where you got to fight through all of it to clear all the different spawns, and they're set to advanced or elite. It could bring in where it might even potentially push teamwork more, because you want someone that can take the threat while you're doing damage. Someone's there that's doing crowd control, so then you're actually building for team mechanics, not just for individual. And like I said, we have to get more details about the map and how it runs, but if it's a solo and a team map, you run it for solo to test yourself, then you can run it as part of a team, and you can harmonize the team. When you go into any run facing any enemy, well, we know that you might want to run this while I run this, and then we can maximize our survival, and then maximize our damage over here, and it becomes more team play, which is something that I think is a little lost in today's Star Trek Online, because it's about just, you can nuke through the targets fast. You don't need someone taking the threat off of you. You really don't need the control. Or if you're a heavy, science and torpedo build, like a couple of our friends have done on this TeamSpeak, and I've been experimenting with, if you've got a super powerful gravity well with high EPG, hard-hitting, high-yield torpedoes with concentrated firepower, you might not need someone to take the threat from you because you're melting them with all the stuff you're doing. You don't need the team, you've got it by yourself. So I see a lot of positives here. And just having the option of a testing ground to test against every enemy where we're not just doing the same maps all the time. It's going to be the same map, but you can fight every enemy in the game on this. I hope a ground version comes out for the same reason. I know we're going to have some Peck, but if we had a ground version, you could use it on the testing grounds and then go to some Peck and you're better prepared for some Peck because you're ready for anything. Same, I guess, that you could say for Kobayashi Maru. You're able to use this as a testing ground and then be able to ready to face most anything in Kobayashi Maru. My only negative here, and I want to put this out to the people that are watching, I know there's not that many, so for all of your friends that you know in game, because I kind of want to spread this. Right now on Tribble, as of tonight, there are bugs with Tribble that we have submitted to them that we need to get fixed. Biggest thing is you cannot respec your skill tree. Your skill trees are broken on Tribble. When you log in, you've got all your skill points where they're supposed to be, and you're getting them, but you also have a skills invalid on 50% of the tunes that I have transferred over. And if you select retrain, it just closes the window. You're not able to retrain. On the ones that I've actually had a successful retrain, it blanks out your traits and you cannot spend your points again. You end up with a blank skill tree. Reputations that get leveled up to tier 6 on Dribble, you lose all the traits associated with that reputation. So if you've leveled up, let's say Romulan, and it's up to only tier 5 and you've done halfway to tier 6 on holodeck, transfer that tune over to Tribble. You have a 65% chance that if you level that Romulan reputation up to Tribble, you will lose all the traits. And I'm talking about your active reputation trait, or the Romulan Singularity, your ground traits, and your space traits will all disappear, not able to be used. There's also about a 15% chance that when you have a starship that you're trying to level up on Tribble, you won't have access to the trait. You'll unlock the mastery to have the trait, but it will not show up, be used, as far as you select it and have it used on your build, even after map transfers and logging in and out of the game. So we've submitted this, we've made the devs aware of this, because if the testing grounds goes into effect without these things fixed, you can test how your build is right now on holodeck on Tribble. You won't be able to change anything. You won't be able to redo your skill tree, and you won't be able to level up ships with a decent certainty that you get the new traits on Tribble. And then you're taking a risk if you want to update your reputations. You may or may not lose all the traits associated with them. It's why a lot of the recent tests we've done, we have stayed, if we have tier 5, we stay with tier 5 because we know at least those traits are good. So it's just hoping that they fix that, because that would be the big key here. With all of that fixed, you can respec and you have access to everything you're supposed to. This is going to be a phenomenal tool, because you'll be able to test something, respec and change and do all the stuff you need to do to refine your build, and you're fine. If they go into effect, we're going to go into a rough patch while they try to patch it. Just keep that in mind. And don't worry, me and Blade will be bugging the heck out of the devs to make for sure this gets fixed before the Proving Grounds goes out. My rant is over, I'm sorry. It happens.
Yeah, we tend to rant a lot, especially
I can't help
off
it.
camera
I'm sorry.
as well. No, I can't either. It just means we enjoy the game. Otherwise, we wouldn't rant as much as we do and pester the devs as much as we do, and to the point that I'm sure they're sitting there thinking whenever we submit a bug, oh Lord, not these jackasses again. What did they bring this
I can't
time?
help it. I find something like that, and I'm like, I don't want to write up paperwork again. But I want the game fixed, and I want it to be fun for everybody, even if you're coming up with something crazy as your build. You should be able to have fun with it without it being broken.
But I think Timber pretty much covered a lot of the stuff I was going to say, for me, I've been wanting to see this for a while. This is something that could be great for new players and veteran players alike. And especially the combat parsing being built in with it as well, because I want to see everybody be able to eventually get into elite content. I want to see everybody be able to do their best in-game and be able to get viable builds for whatever it is they're wanting to do, to get stuff and just have fun and enjoy the game, because that's the entire point of it. And as it sits right now, you could have a situation where somebody may think they're doing really well, when in fact they're really not, and they need to up their game. And then, likewise, you could have the opposite problem. You may think you're doing really poorly, when in fact you're doing actually really great. And giving people better access to these numbers, that way they could tell, how am I doing? Am I doing enough damage? Am I able to crank enough heals when I need it? Do I have enough control? That sort of thing. That allows people better information to better adapt to given situations. They can use this to train against certain foes. Hopefully, if this has a team setting, that maybe veteran players can use it to train their friends that are just coming into the game even. Like, I know I would use the heck out of the map for that reason, training some of the new fleet mates that are coming into the game. Be like, okay, if you want to fight this foe, here's some tips on how to do it. Now go shoot him. And we could practice teamwork, that sort of thing. And to answer that question in chat, we actually do have some guides, and we're actually going to go into a what we call a budget build here after I finish ranting my rant now. And
if that one doesn't, work for you, we've got some others that are logged, and I just released 3 on my channel this week. If you want to see those as well, we've got quite a bit.
Yeah. And we do take requests, by the way, for do you want a tank build? Do you want a science build? Do you want a general kick them in the face with a phaser build? Any of that kind of stuff, different budget levels, that sort of thing. And, do you just have, like, what we consider a bare bones type of budget, which is usually maybe 2 million EC, that sort of stuff. But I'll go over that some more in just a minute when we get to this. But continuing slightly, what I was saying, like, as far as, and even talking about the budget builds, even with the new tools that we have with this, maybe we give somebody a budget build like was asked in the chat. But anyway, what I was saying, like, maybe you're somebody that you've just come back to the game after a long break, or you're somebody that's new to the game, that sort of stuff. You can use this to kind of test out, or maybe somebody like us gives you a budget build, or something along those lines. You want to see, okay, now that I've got this, I want to take it somewhere that I can practice with it, and this could be the perfect map, depending on some of the options, some of the things that they give for us. And this is something I've wanted to see. And another reason too, like I've used off screen as an example. It lets people test at their level, their speed, their comfort zone, so that if they're not comfortable going into runs where there may be a lot of more experienced players, or some people, they're afraid that, if I go in here with this build, people are gonna, talk down at me, or that sort of thing. They could practice on their own with this, master the build, and then go in there and not really worry. An example I give is you could have, like Battle of Corfez. I don't know what the actual number is for people being able to clear it, the hypothetical I've always used is, say, 50k DPS. Let's assume, for sake of argument, you needed 50k DPS minimum from every person to clear it. Then, let's say you've got 4 out of the 5 people that are doing the 50k minimum, and your 5th guy is only doing 25k. Well, that run's probably going to fail because the 5th guy's not yet ready for the content. That could be because of piloting, it could be because of gear, but he's just not ready for it yet. And even if, say, the other guys are able to make up for that extra 25k, let's say you've got 2 of the guys dealing 60, the last guy or the 3rd guy dealing 55, the 4th guy dealing the 50k minimum, the 5th guy still dealing the 25. The run might succeed, but it's going to be a lot harder than it needs to, and it's going to be frustrating for the veteran player and the new player alike. The guy that's dealing the 25k, he's going to be wondering, why can't I damage these guys? Why are they, kicking me in the pants so hard compared to these other guys? When it's just a simple thing of he's not yet ready. Well, now with this, he can practice, he can get ready. He can maybe find some stuff, maybe some of our stuff. Maybe stuff from other helpful YouTubers and people out there. It says, okay, you can go here, you can pair this gear with this ship and this console, and then they go into the map. They practice against Vaudwar for the opening of Corfez. And they're like, okay, yeah, I'm getting closer and I'm closer, and then our dude may see, okay, he's got these pieces of gear, he's improved his piloting a bit, now he's up to 35k. Then he gets a couple more pieces, improves a little more. Now he's at 45k. He's right there. And then, as he improves, he picks up some extra piloting ability, that sort of stuff. Now he's at 55k, and he's over our hypothetical 50k. He goes back with the team, and he kicks the ever-living crap out of Corfez. And he finally is able to succeed the run, whereas he may have not done so well before. So this has the potential to be one of the biggest quality of life tools that this game has given to people in quite some time. And I honestly hope it does. I do hope it makes it to holodeck at some point. So one of the things on Reddit that I had seen was that there were some issues they wanted to iron out first before considering moving it to holodeck. So if you're somebody that is able to get on Tribble, that sort of thing, get on to Tribble, test the living crap out of this map, so that hopefully we could see it brought over to holodeck as well.
Absolutely, and our console people, because quite honestly, they don't have a way like we do. On PC, you've got third-party parsers. On console, they can't use those, so they're having to do basically hard math that they've been given, which they're using Japori Elite math and a few other things, but this honestly would be the biggest quality of life improvement for console, because they can accurately see directly from Cryptic what they're doing. So I want this to hit PC, the holodeck server. I want this to make it to Xbox One and PlayStation, because this would be great for them too.
Absolutely. But anyways, definitely check this out. This should be on Tribble sometime pretty soon, based off of the blog. My estimate is sometime this week, given how they usually do the patch cycles, that sort of thing. Don't quote me on that, just in case it does take a little bit longer. But we're hoping sometime within the next, maybe this week, or sometime in the next couple of weeks, this should be here finally. But anyways, moving on to our budget build this evening. This is one that been wanting to get to for a while, but just due to different stuff, we've not actually gotten to do a build for this ship like we wanted to when it first came out. We've got this is our Discovery Constitution. We're doing a 1-key budget this evening. You can see we're actually flying our Discovery Constitutions in game here. Now you can see the lighting's not that great here. I'm actually using the Jem'Hadar visuals on the ship. I'm not sure what visuals Timber is using for his. What do you have, good sir?
Section 31.
Okay, so he's using the Section 31 visuals. You can kind of see a little bit about what we're doing. You can see a little bit more purple to my engines, and the nacelles due to the Jem'Hadar, that sort of thing.
Which I want to do this in air quotes.
Now this...
Budget. I do that because of the ship. Continue.
Yeah. Now, as far as our budget builds go and everything, this isn't normally a ship that we would get a lot of requests for or anything like that because of where it actually comes from. Now, the way we do our budget builds here on the show is we'll do a budget build over any ship we get a request for, that sort of thing. Even one like this. Our assumption is maybe somebody got the ship, maybe they thought, what the heck, I'll try a random pack, and they get lucky and they drop the ship, and yay, you know, you hit the lottery, you got the big bad ship that you're after, that sort of thing. Or maybe you saved up a bunch of resources and you only have a little bit left to invest in the ship to try to get it up and running. Whatever it is, you just don't have that greatest amount of resources to invest in the ship to get it rolling, and that's what we assume. Now, our 1-key budgets are a variant of our bare bones budgets. There's typically 3 budget levels that we cover. This is for our guy in chat and some people that may not have seen our show that often before. There's 3 different levels of budget that we typically cover. There's the there's the bare bones level of budget, which regardless of how one acquires the ship, we assume that there's a 2 million maximum EC spending limit, and every other item must be free to obtain or cheap as possible. And we typically don't see a lot of gold or epic quality items on the builds unless it actually came with the ship or something along those lines. Then one of the variants we have of that is the 1-key budget, which is what we're going to be doing this evening. And the 1-key budget assumes that whatever the current going rate of a lockbox key is the amount of energy credits you have to spend on the build. The assumption behind that is maybe you've saved up enough Zen, you've sold a lockbox key, and that's what you're using to fund the build. The next step up from that would be our mid-range budgets, where we assume that, okay, you've got a little bit more resources to put into it, you've been able to save up a little bit, you've got a bit more energy credits. For our mid-range levels, we typically assume that you have a maximum EC spending limit of 30 million energy credits. We assume as well that you have enough dilithium to max out one single item, whatever that item is, and take it to epic quality, and take it to maximum. And then finally we have our higher end budgets. Once we get to the higher end levels of budget, we typically assume, unless otherwise specified, there's not really a maximum EC spending limit. Typically we only take into account enough energy credits to purchase 1 or 2 staple consoles from low-buy by generating that, but otherwise we still try to keep it as cheap as possible. And of course we do take requests for different types of builds, tank, DPS, science wizard, whatever you're looking for, we'll try to hook you up with a build. But getting into our build this evening, now I did have to make a couple of notes for substitutions because the builder does not currently have some of the items that come with the build. Now, some of the items you'll see here, the infinity symbol items, I've made notes as to what these actually are. Now, for this particular ship, it's a 5-3 layout, meaning it has 5 weapons in the front, 3 weapons in the rear. For console layout, you can see it's 5 engineering, 3 science, 3 tactical, and then we have the 1 universal, which is a exclusive to the Miracle Worker ships. They get an extra console slot that can be used for anything. Now for our weapons. Now 6 of these phasers, you can see they have the infinity symbol on them. Now these, it says advanced single phasers, TOS. These would normally not be the weapons that you'll see on the ship. This is actually a substitute because the actual advanced phasers are not in the builder at this point in time. So if anybody from Stowe Academy out there sees this, y'all need to add these. This is can be quite a pain sometimes. But for those people that are curious as to what makes these phasers so good, I'll go ahead and I'll mouse over one to show the tooltip. Now, what's so special about the advanced phasers? Your ship will actually come with 6 of them at the Mark 12 Very Rare. So just by getting the ship, you're automatically going to have access to 6 of these phasers. And what they're going to do is they have a 5% chance to give you a large amount of critical severity with the advanced beam arrays for 15 seconds, and it scales with the number of advanced beam arrays you have equipped. So in this case, I have 6 beam arrays, so that's going to give me 60% critical severity whenever this goes off. So that's a pretty hefty chunk of critical severity, and this is something you guys are going to have access to just by getting the ship. And you can purchase additional versions of the phasers, or also purchase the disruptors for a little bit of dilithium in the dilithium store. So that's what you're going to have for the majority of your weapons up front. Now we also have the dark matter torpedo. I'll showcase that in just a moment. So we have 6 of our advanced phasers on the build. Then we also have our trilithium Omni in the back. This comes from the Beyond the Nexus mission. And what's so special about the Omni beams, of course, is they fire in a full 360-degree circle. Doesn't matter where you're at, the Omni will be able to tag it. And then up front we have our dark matter torpedo. This is going to help round out the 2-piece with the Lorca set. We'll take a look at our set bonuses in just a minute. But showcasing our torpedo. Now the numbers are going to be slightly distorted because you guys are seeing a maxed out epic version of the torpedo. But you know what, actually let me pull up the one in Discovery Legends. I can just do that. Scroll down a little bit. Okay, so for the torpedo itself, now the numbers are going to be a little distorted again because I have the temporal agent unlock. But this is essentially what it's going to do. It's going to do a nice chunk of kinetic damage. It's going to add a stack of dark matter dissolution, which is going to deal a little bit of physical damage every second for 20 seconds. And 2 stacks are going to get added on critical hits instead of just the 1. So that dark matter dissolution can be very nasty. That can pile up very quickly and do a lot of damage. So that's what you're going to have for weapons on the ship, is 6 of your advanced phasers, which are going to give you up to 60% critical severity when they go off. Then you also have your dark matter torpedo up front and your trilithium Omni in the rear. Now for our space set, since we're fresh off of a Phoenix event, we actually went with the 4-piece Bajoran, or the Bajor Defense set in this instance, which includes our Bajor Defense Hyper-Injection Warp Core. And what makes the Bajor set so good in this instance is it's going to buff our phasers off of the 2-piece. So you're going to get some nice benefits from that. You're also going to buff the effectiveness of the drain that comes off of the Warp Core. And this is going to be very good. It's going to have a bit of defensive value for people that want something like that, but it's also going to be a more damage-focused set. So if you're looking for something a bit more defensive, there are other options that can be used, but for what we're doing here, which we're assuming is just a nice kick-in-the-pants budget set, this is something you're going to want to consider. You could pick this up from, I believe it is the Scylla and Charybdis mission, if I'm not mistaken, is where you get these 3 items. But you get the engines, the deflector, and shields from Scylla and Charybdis. You also get the warp core from the Phoenix event off of a very rare token now. As far as your devices go, we usually prefer to think of them as personal preference. However, you do have 4 device slots. There are a couple of devices we do usually recommend people to use or to consider, one of which is the energy amplifier batteries, which gives a very hefty category 2 bonus to your energy weapon damage while it's active. And there's also your subspace field modulator, which will give a free equivalent of a neutronium alloy armor's worth of resistances while it's active, as well as, I believe it is 15% defense rating. Now, the downside is it does debuff you for a minus 400 protonic damage resist rating. So, using this device can be a bit of can be a bit of a double-edged sword, if I can talk this evening. So, not a lot of enemies use protonic damage, but there are enough of them to warrant mentioning the debuff that it does smack you with. Now, some other devices you could use are Deuterium Surplus, Gemini Hardpoints, there's even just the basic system batteries, Red Matter Capacitor. Point being, you've got quite a few options that you could use and further tailor to your specific build. Now for our engineering consoles this evening, we have first up the Trillium Deplating, which is basically a hybrid of a field generator and a neutronium slammed into one thing. It's going to give a nice across-the-board damage resistance, as well as a bit of shield capacity for us. We also have our Reinforced Armaments, which is going to give a nice chunk of EPS as its main thing. It's also going to round out our two-piece with our Trilithium Omni that we'll examine in just a minute. Then we have our Simulated Module from the Omega Reputation. This is going to give a bit of critical chance and severity, as well as a tiny little bit of control expertise. Then we have our Ordnance Accelerator, which is going to give a bit of phaser damage in this case, as well as some projectile damage. It does give a little bit of Polaron, as it's from the Gamma Reputation, and phaser and Polaron are the two energy types you can get from that rep. The final console we have is the Reinforcing Squadrons, which comes with the ship. I believe I actually have that on my ship and can show that to you guys. So you can see there, it's going to give a little bit of kinetic damage resistance, as well as a bit of shield hit points. It's going to also launch some additional fighters, and affected pets are going to gain 25% bonus all damage for 20 seconds. So it gives a Category 2 bonus damage to our pets, meaning our pets are going to deal 25% additional damage. So whenever it says 25% bonus damage, it means 25% damage, compared to a Category 1, which only buffs your base damage. Then, for our science consoles, we have the Temporal Disentanglement Suite. This is going to give a nice chunk of critical chance and severity based on your current levels of aux power, up to, I believe, it's 2% chance and 10% severity. And it's also going to give a bit of shield resistance, letting your shields take a bit more damage, as well as a nice chunk of shield capacity. We have our Quantum Phase Converter, which the main reason we're going to have this here is for the extra phaser damage it's going to give. This is going to basically amount to a free tactical console worth of buffing to our phasers. Then we have our Approaching Agony console. This is one of our purchased items for this evening, and this is going to give a little bit of phaser damage, as well as a bit of critical chance for the passives, and then a nice little phaser attack that you can use on click. For tactical consoles, we have 3 of the basic phaser relays. These are just straight up damage boosting to the phasers that we have, and you could pick these up from the Of Science Importance mission. Now this console here, it says booster modulator, but that's actually supposed to be our Lorca's console that comes from Discovery Reputation. I'll go ahead and show that to you guys. Let me find it here in... Oh, there it is on the ship. Okay, so it's going to give a bit of critical chance, it's going to give a bit of weapon power, and a fairly hefty amount of shield pen. Now the one you're seeing here is an epic quality at 13 Ultra. Let me scroll down here. You're going to be getting about 135 shield pen. Now this is a tactical console, so it's not going to buff your phasers in this instance, even though a lot of tactical consoles are normally used to buff your weapons. So it's not going to give just a straight phaser buff like you're used to seeing from some tactical consoles. This is why we put it in the universal slot in this instance, was so we could sort of get around that a little bit and have some of the other consoles. But that's also going to round out our two-piece, which we're going to be taking a look at in just a second. Now, we left the 2 hangar bays blank because we don't like assuming what pets people are going to have access to. However, for this particular build, we are going to recommend people stick with the pets that come on the ship, because you can actually get quite a few of them, and when they get going, they are very nasty little pieces of work. I think Timberwolf would agree with me on that. But taking a look at our 2 pieces for our Discovery reputation, let me pull this up. So what's so good about the Discovery stuff is you actually get, on a critical hit, you get 1% critical severity for 20 seconds that can stack up to 25 times. And if you're firing your weapons pretty regularly, you're going to pretty well stack this up. And it should go for a fair amount of time. So this is potentially up to 25% extra critical severity for you, which is going to be very, very good. But that's what we've got for that particular set bonus. Now, the set bonus from our reinforced armaments and our Trilithium Omni is basically going to give you 5% firing cycle haste for free. That's something that's always going to be active. It's always going to be there so long as you have the items equipped. That's what we have for the equipment on our ship. Now let's go ahead and take a quick look at our skills. Now, our skills here use our standard skill point distribution that we usually recommend for people here on Pilot Review. It's more of a balanced approach. If you want to know why we picked the certain skill points that we did, there is a video that we have on the channel for that, going into a bit greater detail as to why we picked each of the skills that we did. And you can check that out. For those people that want to know just what we used and just want to copy something and go, you can see some of our skill point breakdown here. We have our points for Lieutenant, Lieutenant Commander, Commander, Captain, and of course our Admiral level tier. For our specializations, we went with Intelligence Primary and Miracle Worker Secondary. This is going to grant some offensive and defensive ability for the ship, a bit beyond what it might normally have. For our traits, I'll give that just a moment to load up. So first up, for our personal space traits, we have the beam training ability. This is going to be a nice little chunk of beam damage for free that we pick up. Then we also have Beam Barrage, which is our R&D crafting trait. We typically like to assume that people have leveled one of the R&D crafting schools as they've leveled their character. In this case, we assume they have leveled beams. We have Elusive for free defensive value. That's going to make your ship harder to hit in combat. Fleet Coordinator for free damage based on how many people are in your party. 2% minimum counting yourself, up to a 10% maximum if you're in a full party. And we do have the Grace Under Fire, career-specific trait for engineers. This is because the Stowe Academy builder defaults to engineers. If you are not an engineer, but you're interested in using this build, then replace Grace Under Fire with your own career-specific trait, such as something like Last-Ditch Effort if you're a tactical, or the one for the Photonic Fleet for science officers. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, and you're good to go. Then there's Nanite Repair Matrix, which whenever your hull drops below 50%, this gives you a nice little heal that can be triggered once every so often. We have Point Blank Shot, which is going to increase your energy damage the closer you are to the target, up to a certain maximum. Then we also have our Redirected Armor Plating, which gives a temporary all damage resist rating when struck from behind or the sides. Then finally we have our Projectile Training to round this out a little bit, and is going to buff our Torpedo a little bit. For our Starship traits, we have 4 of them unlocked. We usually like to assume, since it's a budget build, people have not yet unlocked the 5th traits, unless they otherwise specify when requesting a build. First off, we have the Best Defense, which our hull, we grant Look at that. We get a hull healing effect along with the normal effects of our attack patterns. So whatever benefits it gives you, it also now grants a hull healing effect on top of that. We also have our polarized lattice optimized titanium armor, aka plot armor for our ship. And whenever we take a lot of damage in a short period of time, it gives us some very nice benefits. I'm actually going to show you guys some exact numbers from in-game. And for this trait, when taking more than 20% of your max health in 5 seconds, you gain the plot armor for 15 seconds, which makes you immune to transported warheads. It heals for close to 45,000 hull over the duration. It also grants up to 250 all damage resist rating and removes hazard debuffs and dots each second. Now this can only occur once every 45 seconds, but could potentially pull your rear end out of the fire when needed. Then we have the Going the Extra Mile trait, which comes from our Miracle Worker, just by leveling that up. Whenever we heal somebody while they're above 90% maximum hull, they gain additional maximum hull for the duration. We have Predictive Algorithms from Intel, which is a nice little accuracy buff and such. For Space Reputation, we have our Advanced Target Systems. This is going to give a nice chunk of critical severity for free. Energy Refrequencer to help keep the ship alive. As long as we're firing our weapons, we're going to be healing a portion of that damage that we deal. Then we have our Magnified Firepower, which is just a straight up Category 2 damage buff that's always going to be active. Then finally we have our Precision for some free critical hit chance in space. Coming down to our active reputation powers, we have the Anti-Time Entanglement Singularity, which is a nice little AoE kick in the pants and slow to enemies that deals physical damage to them. Our Biomolecular Shield Generator, which helps regen the shields a bit. It reduces damage we take while inside the bubble, as well as healing shields a good little bit. Then we have a nice little oh crap I'm about to die type of button, which is our Deploy Sensor Interference Platform. This particular ability, whenever we throw it, will poof up a little sensor platform that will taunt enemies to itself until it either is destroyed or the duration runs out, whichever of those two things happens first. Then finally we have our Quantum Singularity Manipulation, which gives a very large boost to all of our science stats for the duration it's active, as well as granting a temporary cloaking effect. To cheese a bit more damage out of your anti-time, throw any exotic buffs you may have first, follow with Quantum Singularity Manipulation, and then drop your anti-time on top of folks, and you will get a bit more bang for your buck. And lastly, coming into our bridge officers, we see on the ship we have a Lieutenant Commander Universal, Lieutenant Universal / Command, a Lieutenant Commander Tactical, Commander Engineering / Miracle Worker, and an Ensign Science seat. Now for our Lieutenant Commander Tactical, we went with a tactical team. This is going to give some nice buffs, as well as redirect our shields and purge boarding parties. We have our attack pattern beta to debuff foes that we hit. We have our Fire at Will 3, which is going to smack anything within range with a beam. Then for our Lieutenant Universal / Command, we went with a Torpedo Spread 1 and then a Rally Point Marker 1. And this is going to be a nice little healing effect whenever needed for us and teammates that enter the marker. Next we have for Ensign Science our Hazard Emitters, which is going to be a nice little heal over time, slight damage reduction, as well as purging certain debuffs. For Lieutenant Commander Universal, we went with a Science seat in this case. We have our Science team to recharge our shields a bit. This is also going to purge subnucleonic-based debuffs. And we also have our Transfer Shield Strength, which is going to heal our shields a bit. And then we have our Gravity Well to round out our Science powers with a bit of control, and potentially a zero distance power if you are somebody that is interested in tanking. For our last seat, our Commander Engineering / Miracle Worker, we have an emergency power to Engines 1. This is a nice little get the crap out of dodge button whenever you need to. Then we have our emergency power to weapons 2. This is going to give a nice damage buff to our engines, or damage buff to engines. Damage buff to weapons. It's one of those days, folks. It's a long night. But anyway, it gives a damage buff to our weapons, and also a nice bit of weapons power. Then we have our narrow sensor bands 3, which is going to increase our accuracy by a fair amount, and is going to give anywhere from a 20% up to a 50% category 2 damage buff the closer we are to the target, and is overall going to be a nice kick in the pants to foes. And then finally, for our last bridge officer power, we have our reverse shield polarity 3, which is going to recharge our damage in a pinch, or recharge our shields in a pinch based off of incoming damage. Again, it's been one of those nights, folks, so my bad if I say something stupid from time to time. But anyways, as far as overall costs for the build, since this is a one-key budget, we assume that all of the rules from the bare bones budget apply. In this case, we assume we have a slightly higher budget. Total cost for this build, you're looking at about 2.9 million EC. That's to buy our approaching Agony console. You're looking at about 49,500 dilithium. This is, of course, assuming, for the most part, that the discounts have been unlocked. This is mostly buying our consoles and our weapons. And that's roughly 7 days of refining time for dilithium, assuming only a single tune is refining dilithium per day. So overall with this ship, you should be able to get a nice little kick in the pants to foes if you're somebody that's picked one up. But, yeah, any comments or thoughts on our build, Sir Timberwolf?
I mean, for me, I'd probably build it a little bit differently. Potentially either go a little bit more budget, or to go a little bit more damage based, because there is a lot of survival there, but overall it does look good.
And fair enough. But yep, we always like to bounce ideas around for people a little bit to showcase that this is mainly a template that we give to people. They don't have to build it exactly like this, but at the very least it gives people ideas. But that's what we've got for a budget build this evening. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have requests for any other budget builds, feel free to let us know. But anyways, that's pretty much what we've got for a show this evening for you guys. I know we ran quite a bit longer than we normally do. There was a good bit of stuff to go over, some of it fairly significant this week. And I say we've covered the major bugs already earlier in the show. As far as that stuff goes, definitely get on Tribble, help test the stuff out so we can get that new map over to Holodeck, because I want to see that come to Holodeck. I know Timber does too, and I'm sure a lot of you guys do as well. But anyways, as we're heading out the door, a shout out to our good friends over at the Temporal Armada. A very cool bunch of people, be sure to check them out. Also our other good friends over at the Strike Group Armada, very cool people as well. And our last group of friends we want to give a shout out to is our good friends over at the Kurtang Pirate Radio. The party is there. You don't know what kind of music they're going to have playing. It's usually a good mixture of stuff, new and old alike. But anyways, if you have any requests for the Budget Builds Corner, feel free to let us know. We do take requests at any of the varying budget levels. You know, you can tell us, hey, I've got this particular ship, I want to be a tank, or I want to be a space wizard, or I want to deal damage, and I've really only got a bare bones budget, or whatever level you've got, we'll try to hook you up with a build. And if you think that you're gearing your setups in order, but it's your piloting that needs a little bit of work, you know, feel free to submit a video of your piloting to us, and we can offer tips and tricks on how to improve, as well as perhaps even go on a few runs with you if you'd like, and we're able to do so and whatnot. If you have any bugs for the Bugs Corner, feel free to let us know. We will pass those along to the developers. In addition to forum moderation duties, that's another thing I help them out with, is I submit bugs to the devs so they can get fixed and patched, because they don't like bugs any more than you or I do. If you have any requests for the RP Corner, feel free to let Artie know. He does take requests on that. Could be something as simple as, what is his opinion on the new feature with the Romulans? How would he handle that as far as a Federation captain using a warbird? Or how would he recommend some of the RP groups do something like that? Or it could be something else entirely different. But feel free to let him know. He does take requests, and he may just talk about your topic on air. But for now, folks, this is the Pilot Review Show. Thank you guys for being patient and joining us once again. I know it's been a little bit since we were able to get a show out there for you folks. We do apologize for the delays. But for now, folks, this is the Pilot Review Show reminding you to have your tribbles spayed and or neutered. Goodbye, everybody.
See you guys later.